stop buying cars. This is how we got into trouble in the first place. The literal car market is in a crisis and it is blown up out of proportions. Why do you think now we're looking at vehicles that are way overpriced at MSRP? People were paying way too much money for a lot of vehicles. Vehicles a year ago, 2 years ago, people were caught literally paying over sticker price. The dealers were just over there salivating. You could literally walk into a dealership and pretty much say, hey, how much for that? And they would never even budge just because there was a couple of key elements going on. Sure, while there was a little bit of a car shortage in the last couple of years, we all know that. It all started with chip shortages. Then there was an inventory shortage because a lot of the vehicles were on the lot, but they maybe didn't have all of the components and they had to sit there and wait to get all the parts and pieces put back in there. And so they sat there. And so there was a lower inventory and people just felt this urgency that they needed to buy a new car. Interest rates are low, so they figured, why not? Even if they paid over sticker price, that was okay by a lot of people because they knew that they were making it up. Pre-2020, when we were talking about 2019, 2018, and we start to see interest rates that were way bottomed out, 0%, 0.9%, 1% interest rates, people were actually literally okay. If you believe it or not, they're okay in paying over sticker, knowing that they were saving it on the other end by buying now, knowing that, of course, it's an inevitability that we're going to see increasing interest rates. So it held off for a while. Shortage of cars, great interest rates. I better get on it, and I better get on it now. I remember walking into a dealership. I went into a Toyota dealership. I was actually shopping for a brand new Toyota Camry. We wanted to replace my daughter's car. She had an older BMW. The thing was causing her all kinds of heartburn. It was very problematic in so many different ways. So it was time to just let that car go. And we said, you know what, let's go shopping for a Toyota. It's funny when you have a very unreliable vehicle, you usually go full scale the other way. You go literally the most reliable car you can find. So we knew where better place to start than Toyota. So we shopped around a little bit. We looked at some of the cars on the market, the Corollas, the Camrys. She wasn't a big fan of SUVs, so we thought, well, let's just look at what they have for cars. We looked at the Corolla. It looked like a little scaled down, and for a couple grand more, you can get up into a base Camry. So it seemed like great value. So I took my daughter. We went down to the local dealership. We started sniffing around. We walked into this dealership, and again, remember, this is about a year and a half ago. Unfortunately, it was during the prime. Interest rates were still quite low. It was just before interest rates start to take off again. So we went in there. We actually looked around, and there was a wide open showroom that literally had one car sitting there. There was a Toyota Supra parked in the lot, actually in the showroom. There was virtually no vehicles on the lot other than the service department. So it kind of got us wondering, look around. There's no cars. Well, that's the problem. A lot of these car manufacturers decided, you know what? Let's control the velocity that we set vehicles out to market. And so Toyota was classic, build as you buy. So they weren't loading up their car lots, and they soon figured out that there's a lot of money to be made in that. We also noticed allegedly GM as well withheld, and they slowed production. They stopped their plants for a week at a time to let it get caught up, to let the backlog build and let people decide that, you know what, there's not a lot of cars on the lot. We better get on this. So there's all this urgency that these dealers are starting to create, and they knew the shortages were definitely going to end soon. They knew the chips started playing catch up. We knew obviously chips started being recreated, putting back in the vehicles, and inventory was starting to become available. We also noticed, the Hyundai brand, Kia brand, there is allegedly some conversation that vehicles were being created. They were built in its entirety, sent to North American market, and then left on an offloading site somewhere. And then with this perception that the OEM dealers were actually telling customers, well, you're weeks, you're months away, to create this false sense of, I've got to have it, this urgency. But unfortunately, all this urgency, low interest rates, people had all this buying power, they're sitting at home, and of course, the dealers were offering, in the initial part of this whole conversation, we're offering some incentives. But then as we transition through this, obviously interest rates start to climb, dealers start to claw back, start to control the velocity of the output of production. Again, Toyota, GM, a lot of these manufacturers just didn't have the volumes. We also saw in the big three, GM, Ford, Stellantis, of course, they were about to embark in that imminent strike, in which case they knew they had to scale up. But they still knew that we need to control the velocity somehow. And unfortunately, people still had this sense of, I need to buy something, and I need to buy it right away. But as we rolled in there was still this feeling that people needed to pay over sticker. There's no need to pay over sticker. See, part of the problem was, I remember going into a Chevy dealer as well, And walking in there is a new C8 Corvette. I test drove our demo they had outside. And then I walked inside and I said, how much for this 2LT? It was basically a Stingray. And they told me 140 grand. How is that even possible when those cars stickered for about $89,000 Canadian funds as a starting price? So I said, this is ludicrous. I went home, I took the build sheet, I literally built that car on the internet, on the GM Canada website, and it came up with a total of about $105,000, all in with the extras I added on. So how did we get from $105,000 to $140,000? It's because the buyers were willing to take it, grab their ankles, and take it by the dealers. Now, unfortunately, the buyers, the consumers were, a lot of cases people needed vehicles. They needed new cars, new trucks, new SUVs. But a lot of people just bought it because it was the next shiny toy, or they had this extra expendable cash. They were sitting at home. They didn't spend all the money on fuel and all these other things. They weren't traveling during then 2020 and 21. So they figured, let's redirect some of our funds. We're not traveling. Let's put it into a new vehicle. Let's get that great shiny new vehicle. Again, people were willing to pay over sticker. Ability for these manufacturers continually promote the sales of vehicles with elevated price tag. They're putting a paint protection film, roof racks, glass etching, and the like. They were adding all these extras, but they were also putting on a newfound, never heard before feature called the market adjustment fee. The market adjustment pricing was something that they just came off ad hoc. They could come up with something. They needed something. They could only charge so much for paint protection film. They could only charge so much for glass and tire levy and all these other features, because everybody knows those are kind of standard items that are pretty typical in the industry. So how do we tack on all this extra buffer and fat? Well, let's come up with a market adjustment fee that people weren't used to, and just justify it with the sense that, obviously people who want to pay it anyway, we'll put this on and we'll pitch it to the customers that it's really more just about the fact that there's a shortage. And this shortage means that we can charge whatever we want. And they were being extra arrogant. In my experience, when I walked into that Toyota dealership, the dealers didn't even want a deal. They literally did not want a deal. They said, here's the price. That's what it is. Give us your deposit. We'll order it online here. The only fortunate part about Toyota, I will say, in their defense, in my personal experience, was they didn't charge over at that time. They charged sticker, but they sat there with you, but they weren't even negotiating. There's no extra throw-ins. There's no incentives. And we know that has changed. Historically, you could negotiate costs off. You could knock some money off of the price of a vehicle. But even we could not do it no matter what. They basically said, yeah, sorry about your luck. And they looked there with this absolutely glazed over, glassy stare that suggested that we weren't going to get not even $1 off the MSRP. Now, while we felt lucky because they were actually just sticker price, a lot of other manufacturers were charging more. Like Kia and Hyundai were billing a lot of people a lot of extra market adjustment fees because of vehicles like the Palisade and some of these, newly released vehicles that were highly popular and selling like hotcakes. People were willing to spend it. Hey, they look over, spouse looks over, husband and wife looking at each other, deciding, we need one of those. Yeah, you're right. We do need one of these. Are you sure? Yeah, we need. The old vehicle has 140,000 kilometers. Yeah, that is kind of high. And then they just agreed to agree, and they go down and spend all their hard-earned dollars and overpaid for a vehicle that's really not worth it. Now here is how we got to this place. Manufacturers, market adjustment fees, tacking add-ons, getting the vehicles with the highest margins so they could add even extra fat and extra fluff into these vehicles. People found themselves grossly overpaying for vehicles and definitely buying some of the vehicles that had the highest market, highest ticket items associated with them. And that's how we got here today. We didn't get here because of the greedy dealers. Well, we did, indirectly. A lot of the dealers and OEMs decided and obviously figured out that there's clearly a market for this. But the market was absolutely sustainable at the time, and people were willing to overpay for these vehicles. So here we go, fast forward to today, and now we're in a place where people have way overpaid for a lot of vehicles. And unfortunately, a lot of those folks that were paying way too much and way over sticker, including market adjustment fees, now are finding themselves, now that we're outside of some of this and we're clearly not in a place where 2019 prices, we're not seeing that yet. However, a lot of the standard depreciation is starting to kick into high gear. And now a lot of these people are looking at, Hey, I bought a year ago. I got snookered in at a 12% interest rate. I bought this vehicle. I ended up paying $8,000 over sticker. And now the vehicle has started to kick into high gear with this standard depreciation. And now I have this vehicle that's worth way less than I paid for it. And I'm so far underwater and in debt on this vehicle, I'll never get out of it. So I'll pretty much have to give it away or buy my way out and pay money for the bank to even take this vehicle, especially in a case of a repossession or a delinquency. So people are now stuck with vehicles they just paid way too much for. And unfortunately, it's the consumers. And while a lot of people needed their vehicles, those are the folks, unfortunately, that got caught up in the mix and the tangle of this disgusting market where a lot of people were just overpaying. And the odd person that actually needed a vehicle because they needed to get to work and their vehicle was legitimately blown apart and there was legitimately nothing left. Those are the folks that had to go buy a vehicle and were subject to likely higher interest rates, inflationary cost increases, and of course MSRPs that were taking a climb upstairs. Now, here we are. This all has to stop somehow. Turning the page, and now a lot of these manufacturers, OEMs, we know Stellantis, Jeep, Ram, are offering up incentives, $3,000, $5,000, buybacks, and all these other little incentives or cash back for X amount of dollars to offset the price of some of these vehicles brand new. It's still not really all that much. Push come to shove. Look at what these vehicles were 5 years ago. I mean, the quality of the vehicles actually gone down. If you look across a lot of these vehicles now, I can speak to this. I've seen Mercedes-Benz, in my personal opinion, my personal experience, from a vehicle we also personally bought, the quality is nowhere near the same on a modern day Mercedes as it was on a 20-year-old Mercedes-Benz, where the quality there, the vehicle would hold up, the materials, the leather wouldn't break down, you wouldn't have roof fabric falling from the ceiling, you wouldn't have engines that were burning oil, and a lot of the times they were over-engineered. Today now they're smaller engines, turbocharging, they're not built to hold up as long as they once were. And even the material, fit and finish, and the quality, everything's riveted, punched together, plastic parts, fit and finish, everything's snapped together, fittings, cooling lines start to crack and leak. They're not built like they once were. So that's the insult to injury on this. We're enabling these dealers to build a lower quality product, put it to market, and we're all willing to pay even more money for these products. So they're hitting a double whammy. They're taking it on both ends, saving costs on manufacturing and parts, and taking more of it, obviously, on the new price of the sales of their new vehicles. So here we are as a consumer taking it on both ends. So really, we only have one trump card. Any guesses on what that trump card is? It's really not buying. Now, we all need vehicles. We got to get around. Some people just like a vehicle, and some people just don't care. Some people will pay over sticker. Some people will pay escalated prices. Some people don't worry about a 9%, 12%, 15% finance rate. Some people just don't care, and that's okay. Everybody to each their own. All I know is there's a lot of people that are thinking about, the dollars and cents. We always think about the investments, right? Okay, you buy a car and everybody says it's the worst investment in your life. It's not really an investment. But, people say, oh, you're a 401k and, all these things. You're putting money away for your mutual funds, your investments, your pensions, your stocks, and, the whole thing. People put hard-earned dollars in that to shelter from taxation as well as to have money when they retire. So they might put, like, for example, a TFSA, they might put $5,000 or $10,000 in a TFSA every year, but then they go on the other side and they're willing to go willy-nilly and lose $15,000, $20,000 on depreciation and pay through the teeth for their next new vehicle. It all has to sort of play together and all has to make sense. Now, I'm not saying don't buy. Absolutely, go buy a car. We only live once. And we all have to remember that. You know what? You can't take it with you when you go. But why pay more than we have to? We all have to be working this game together. And clearly the dealers, the OEMs are coming up with creative ways to extract more money from your pocket. All I'm saying is tread cautiously, shop around, look for opportunities, and make sure if you're taking advantage of some of these incentives, that they're really incentives. Do comparisons, shop to different dealers, and maybe shop between different brands because some brands will give you better deals than other brands. And sometimes there's this up and down game. Ford, for example, in the Lightning, they played a lot of yo-yo games there in the last year or so where they were testing the market at different price points. And then they kind of settle into a place where they're at now and realize nobody's buying anyway. And they scaled into half output for their Ford Lightning, their EV pickup truck. So clearly you have to shop around. Don't be so quick to jump to the pump. Certainly fix what you got right now, and definitely pick the right time of year. The end of the year, as you transition into the next model year, probably the best time. I would likely suggest, unless you're one of those that really need the latest and greatest, your best vehicle with the best quality, definitely with least problems, is the end of the production run. So definitely as you're transitioning into a new model type, unless you really need to have that new tech or that new body style, definitely reconsider, because you'll get a better deal, better incentives, and probably a better quality vehicle on the output of the last of that production run number. So definitely, I hope that helps give you some insight. We are actually, as the consumer, a big reason why this whole market flipped and why we're at today. And all I'm saying is, it's not that you don't buy, but definitely slow down the purchasing, shop around, and make sure you're making a conscious, intelligent decision on your next new car or truck or SUV purchase. And I know some of you are listening because definitely want to check out that video. There is actually, in fact, a crisis. There are, in fact, some car and truck dealers that are starting to creep out of business, and you can actually get some great deals. Hope to see each and every one of you on the next one. We'll all see you real soon. Bye-bye.